So this MAGA communist people are oriented towards a small sector of the working class, not even the majority of the working class. And they're super patriotic or patriotic communism. Like their idea, Caleb Maupin is based on Earl Browder, Communist Party leader in the 40s. He was kicked out of the Communist Party. But his idea was theory of American exceptionalism. He said that like communism is 20th century Americanism. I think it's nonsense. That's really, really reactionary, really nonsensical. So anyway, as I said, so Jackson linked up with this guy Haas, who was pushing MAGA communism. And I think it was towards the end of the time he was on Jimmy Dore. Okay, so I'd like to briefly talk about the LaRouche organization, LaRouche people. There's some connection here. Okay, and I talked about this in an earlier video. I'll try to make this really brief. Lyndon LaRouche was an odd figure. He was a Trotskyist originally. He used the name Lynn Marcus, his political name, when he was a leftist. He was in the Socialist Workers' Party from like late 1940s until the mid 1960s. And he was not a particularly distinguished member. He was never in the leadership. He had a reputation of being a bit of a megalomaniac. He had these theories. He lived in the Boston area and he was fascinated by science of cybernetics developed by Norbert Wiener at MIT. And he was fascinated by this. And he was interested in systems theory. So he wrote these long-winded articles on it, which the Socialist Workers' Party had to print it out and hand copies to everybody. And people thought this guy he was basically a megalomaniac, a crank, a legend in his own mind figure, intelligent but odd. And his day job, he was a party activist on and off. His day job was a management consultant, strange as it sounds. He left, as far as I know, he left the Socialist Workers' Party in I think 1965. He was part of the group, the Revolutionary Faction, which became the Spartacus League, the Sparts. He was actually a founding member of the Sparts. If you're involved in leftist politics, you'll come across the Sparts. They hate to be called the Sparts, the Spartacus League, or whatever. Anyway, he was actually briefly a founding member. He quickly left. He had a falling out with Jim Robertson, the founder. He briefly left. For a few years, he dropped out of politics. But he reemerged in 1967. Lynn Marcus reemerged in 1967. Activism connected to Columbia, several waves of activism in Columbia University against the Vietnam War and gentrification, a whole series of issues. So these radicals, he was not a student or a professor. They taught that they had this some radical students put on a free university where community education. He taught classes in Marxism, and he was brilliant. He was really intelligent. And radical students were desperate for theory, any type of theory, and they wanted some type of Marxist theory. There's a pole of attraction guy, Mark Rudd, who's an anarchist, who was the other pole of attraction. I read an autobiography of Mark Rudd. It came very moving, came from an Italian-American family, and he had a conflict with his dad. Really moving book. Anyway, the Mark Rudd group represented one faction. There's people at Columbia, a lot of radical firm at Columbia University. And Mark Rudd was one faction. Lynn Marcus / Lyndon LaRouche was another faction. And he built an organization out of it. It was called the National Congress of Labor Caucuses, NCLC. And he built it up into a major national organization. They had branches in 25 cities. In the early 70s, this group, NCLC, was a major thing on the U.S. left. They started the U.S. Labor Party. No connection with the Labor Party of the 90s, which is something Ray Mazzocchi, something totally different. But there's U.S. Labor Party. It was kind of a thing on the left. Well, then the LaRouche group got weird. They became a cult. They had the technique of ego stripping, psychological manipulation. A couple other groups are doing this. Newman, a psychotherapeutic cult in New York, and a few other groups, the Nora Fulani, this coming out. They kind of there's evidence they borrow techniques from one another. Anyway, so partly they're going to be a revolution. In order for there to be a revolution, we have to eliminate other groups. And these groups are fascist. We got to eliminate them. The groups we have to eliminate were the Communist Party, the Socialist Workers' Party, and the Progressive Labor Party. So LaRouche people sent out their members. They did a long time prepping people. They sent out members to beat up members of these organizations. And there were 25 assault cases throughout the country. They beat them. Most part, no one pressed charges. There were some charges were pressed. Mostly, socialists don't like to get the police involved for obvious reasons. There was later a class action suit, but it was a weird incident. Then LaRouche Group pivoted to the right. Basically, they felt that Lynn Marcus felt there was going to be an imminent revolution in the 70s. Imminent revolution, or on the brink of revolution. Their logo, actually, interestingly, was a city skyline in flames, like revolution. There's the Labor Party, U.S. Labor Party, a city in flames and a raised fist. He was disappointed when we actually didn't have a revolution. And he thought the problem was like deindustrialization. It was the beginning 70s, so the beginning of deindustrialization. Other organizations, Maoist groups, had some also observed this as well. So he thought about this, and the problem was we have to revive the industrial base in order to revive the working class. We have to revive the industry. So they became very productivist. I don't know what the term is. There's a German economist named Friedrich List, who was Germany unified 1871 under Bismarck, and Germany was the first planned economy. They had an industrial boom over a couple of decades. They became a major industrial power in the late 19th, early 20th century. This guy Friedrich List was like in charge of a planned economy. He had actually lived in the U.S. for a long time, and he was influenced by a school of economics called the American system. Which is started by Alexander Hamilton. So the LaRouche people got into this. They eventually moved to the far right. They dropped Marx they went to Rosa Luxemburg. They dropped Rosa Luxemburg and replaced her with Alexander Hamilton. They had this Hamiltonian hard developmentalism. And they also tried to ingratiate themselves with the American right wing. The right wing didn't want to have anything to do with them because they had a reputation of being a communist group. But they offered their services to the FBI, the CIA. They informed on anti-war dissidents. They built themselves up into a major organization that's still around today. And they had the literature in the 80s was just weird. I read some of that. They had paranoid theories about the British monarchy. Queen Elizabeth was involved in an heroin smuggling operation. They had all these weird theories. They were kind of cold. I came across them around from 04 to 08 in the Boston area. They were around. They would table. They would act like socialist organizations. They would sell literature tables. They weren't socialists by any means. I read some of their pamphlets. It wasn't bad. It was like not bad, but mainstream. It was bad, but mainstream Keynesian economics didn't explain why the ruling class abandoned Keynesianism. So they need Marxist analysis to do that. They talked about all the great things we could have. We had Keynesian economics. They didn't explain why we abandoned it, but okay, then Lyndon LaRouche would have this weird rant about cultural Marxist. He apparently invented the term cultural Marxist. The idea that the Marxists couldn't, he had been a Marxist himself at one time, this idea that the Marxists couldn't get the working class interested in their ideas, so they focused on the cultural, they talk about, he had these paranoid theories about the Frankfurt School. Academic like Herbert Marcuse and Theodore Adorno or whatever. He had these theories. Cultural Marxism was destroying the family, destroying religion. That's a way they were going to destroy all the institutions of society, bore from within. And this big trope on the right, Lyndon LaRouche came up with this idea, as far as I understand. By the way, I forgot to mention earlier, when he was still a leftist, when he was with his national NCLC group, he was bitterly homophobic. And also misogynist. Women from the SWP wanted to work with him, and he had this totally misogynist, he was apparently an extremely nasty figure. And at one time, his girlfriend, when he was still in this group, when he's still a leftist, his girlfriend left him for a British Trotskyist. So on the paper, the next front page of their newspaper said, it was the impotence of British Trotskyism. I mean, it's so weird. But anyway, Lyndon LaRouche's group moved to the far right. They built up a fairly large organization, and they rebranded themselves like a private intelligence service, like a private CIA. They apparently have some links with Russian government. I don't know what it is. Okay, the reason why I spent so much time on this, there's some deep connections with Caleb Maupin, especially Caleb Maupin's group, and with Hank Haas. I don't know what they are, but you read the LaRouche literature, it's exactly what Caleb Maupin's saying. He's giving it more of a socialist slant, but it's the same thing. He's very strong on developmentalism, and there's some, complicated nuance. They're not nuanced about it at all. The idea they complain about Malthusianism of the ruling class has been a strand in Marxism. István Mazáros, famous Hungarian Marxist, he talked about the Club of Rome in the 70s and the Malthusian tendency within capitalism. This is something going on, absolutely. But the LaRouchites have their own weird, extreme version of this. Okay. So anyway, you read the LaRouche literature, it's exactly what Caleb Maupin's saying. And Caleb Maupin, even actually interestingly, he kind of talked about the LaRouche group somewhat. So, he slams the counterculture. He thinks there's CIA operation. Caleb Maupin's group is like normie socialism, very like conservative, button down type social for normal people, not countercultural. His thing, out of the movement, into the masses. I kind of agree with that, but he does a weird take on it. Okay. So, the literature is exactly this. It's like, I have a suspicion Caleb Maupin's CPI, Committee for Political Innovation, is basically LaRouche front group. There's some deep connections. I'm not sure what they are. I think Haas and Hinkle also has some deep connections with the LaRouche organization. By the way, Caleb Maupin talked about this a bit. He talked about LaRouche people. He slams the counterculture. I think it was like a CIA front. CIA, MK Ultra popularized LSD in the 60s, and might have some truth to it. He talked about this book, the Queering Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson. He talks about this a lot. I've actually read the book. It's okay. He thinks it was popularized by the CIA. Might be. Thing is, he talks about this, but he doesn't. He talks about the LaRouche people pretty favorably. They have some great ideas. I don't agree with everything they say, but they have some great ideas. But he doesn't mention Operation Mop Up. He knows it very well, but he doesn't mention some of the weird stuff. So there are some deep connections with the LaRouche people. Okay, there's a date here. On 2022, October 13th, 2022, activist Jose Vega, New York activist. I think he's from the Bronx. Seems like a really nice guy. He heckled AOC from the left at some public meeting. Like, why are you supporting Nazis in Ukraine? I thought it was a great intervention. I applauded. This is great. Why are you funding Nazis in Ukraine? This is when people were starting to realize AOC was a phony. She's not total phony. And the proxy war, it was kind of widely understood as a proxy war, U.S. proxy war against Russia. And so why are you funding Nazis in Ukraine? And he got a lot of attention in indie media. He was on, Jimmy Dore interviewed him, Dude Business, Lee Camp. I have a bunch of people interviewing him. I was surprised to learn Jose Vega is in the LaRouche organization. I was kind of surprised by that. I get weird vibes from the LaRouche people. Really, really weird. I don't believe in original sin, but I get weird vibes from them. Their literature sounds kind of rational reading it now, but I'm not. Anyway, so 2 days later, they have this LaRouche people have this outfit in New York, the Schiller Institute. So they had a conference on green fascism. Green and Jackson Hinkle, and Haz Aldin spoke at it. I don't know what they talked, but they spoke to it. So the LaRouche people don't believe in climate change. They think that's wrong. They believe, the ruling class's Malthusian degrowth agenda. There's some grains of truth to it, but they take this weird, hard. And there was concern a couple of years ago on the left about eco-fascism. And that's a tendency. I think the LaRouchites have their own version of fascism, frankly. So Haz and Hinkle spoke at their green fascism conference. Okay. Now, just thought I'd get all that out there. Okay, so where was I here? Now, LaRouche people, they have cult vibes. I knew people, they tried to recruit friends of mine in the Boston area. They were extremely persistent. They call 5 or 6 times a day. They were odd. There's a LaRouche pack.